Hello, everybody. Give me a second here while I share my screen with you. There we go. Okay, well, welcome to biology. This is going to be the first chapter. There we go. I'm having issues with this thing. There we go. So this is supposed to be the first chapter. Let's see. I encourage you that to pay attention to what's in red. I like to emphasize those things that you need to know. Okay, so feel free to use these PowerPoints as a guideline to the most important aspects of the chapter that you need to know. So let's see here. Your author Krogh starts criticizing the world. It's actually kind of entertaining. He tells us that even though science and technology is increasing in the world, our knowledge of it is decreasing. And I don't know. Sometimes it feels like what he's saying is true. Here, one second. As I talk about this, I'm having trouble with my Zoom. There we go. And so I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Do we need to know how a cell phone works in order for us to use it? Do we need to know how a car works in order for us to use it? It doesn't seem like we need to, right? It doesn't seem like we do, but it just seems like the more advanced technology becomes, the less knowledgeable that we become about it, and this is criticism. He's of the opinion that as science and technology advances, we should try to keep up with it. Well, what can we say? Um, so the point that he starts out with is, until the 1990s, we didn't have emails, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have internet, we really didn't have really good laptops, we really didn't have flash drives. I mean, really, technology is undergoing a revolution right now. And to be sincere, it's almost a little bit hard to keep up with it. Um, so this is one of the things that he brings up. I love this. This is an old computer, if you can see this on your PowerPoint. And what this is showing is one of the old computers that didn't even use solid state transistors. They used vacuum tubes. So let me see if I can make this bigger. Yes, I can. So each one of these little guys, if you can believe it, is a little vacuum tube. And these computers used to be the size of entire rooms. They produce a lot of heat because vacuum tubes ran with cathodes and anodes that produce a lot of heat. And consequently, they would be blowing up all the time. So how can I convey to you how weird this is? This would be analogous to taking your simplest calculator, making it the size of a room, and then you have to stop in your calculation every so often because a piece of your calculator is blowing up. That's where we started in those humble beginnings. If you look back here, right in the middle, that's a little head of an engineer, and they're probably changing a vacuum tube. That's where, and this is not millions of years ago. This is honestly 5 decades ago. Okay, this is not a long time ago. And now what do we have? Now we have, now we have, whoops, now we have touchscreen laptops. Um, I just looked at a laptop from Dell the other day. You can buy a Dell laptop with 4 terabytes of memory. Wow, what am I going to do with that? Unless I'm taking video, there's really nothing I can use it with. But 4 terabytes. If you go back just 20 or 30 years, those are kind of things that made up supercomputers. And now you can buy something that you put on your lap that has that. So again, the point that your author is bringing is here's technology just blowing up at an exponential rate, and we're having a lot of trouble keeping up with it. Okay. So, oh, look, we have red. This is probably something you should remember. So, William Shockley of Bell Labs invented the transistor. What's a transistor? Well, the transistor is a solid state version of one of these vacuum tubes. Why does that matter? It matters because now these things weren't blowing up all the time, and you can make things a lot smaller. So the invention of the transistor at the end of World War II, 1947, revolutionized technology as we know it. Everything they use now, calculators, computers, everything uses millions upon millions upon millions of transistors. Okay. So what do we know? Okay. I love this. He says almost 80% of adult Americans who were surveyed know that the continents are moving about the face of the earth. So again, this is a criticism by the author saying, here's science and technology advancing, and 80% of uh, of people don't even know something as trivial as the fact that the continents are moving about the face of the earth. How is that possible? I love this one. Of those surveyed, 25% think that the sun goes around the earth. Ooh, that's scary. 1 in 4 people believe that the sun is going around the earth. They're stuck in the times of the ancient Catholic Church. Uh, let's hope not. Okay. So, what is science? Okay. Science is a body of knowledge. Okay. It's supposed to be foundational. It's supposed to be based on evidence. It's supposed to provide explanations for nature. Okay. And let's look at some concepts of science. First of all, what is a theory? Well, a theory, and this is a common confusion, okay? A theory is a set of principles supported by evidence, okay? Now, just because something is called a theory, it doesn't mean that a scientist is not pretty sure about it. So we have the theory of evolution, for example. It doesn't mean that we don't believe in evolution, okay? We have we have an overwhelming amount of evidence that supports evolution, but we still call it a theory, okay? Why? Because science works under the premise that nothing is an absolute. Nothing is going to be absolutely true, and that it only takes one piece of evidence to the contrary to demonstrate that something is no longer a fact. So consequently, just because we call something a theory, it doesn't mean that we don't believe that it's pretty darn true, okay? So what separates a theory from a hypothesis? A theory is supported by evidence. A hypothesis is an educated guess that is not necessarily supported by evidence, okay? So when you're talking in mixed company and somebody goes, I have a theory about this, feel free to go, no, no, no. You mean you have a hypothesis. You think you have an explanation for something. That's a hypothesis. That is not a theory, okay? So what have we done? We have just started what's called the scientific method, okay? So the scientific method is a structured means of investigation. If you look at something, you observe something, and you have a question about it, and you want to know what the answer is, and you use logic to deduce that answer, you enter what's called the scientific method, okay? The scientific method for us is going to consist about observation. You look at something. When you look at something, it makes you form a question. That question allows you to draw various hypotheses. Once those hypotheses are made, you can carry out an experiment, and then that experiment comes to a conclusion. Okay, so one of the things that I like to use is the old "my car doesn't work" experiment. Okay, you get up in the morning, you go to work, you turn the key, wee 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 wee, nothing happens. Your car doesn't turn on. You just made an observation. My car doesn't turn on. I have a question. Why doesn't it turn on? We have just entered the scientific method. Now what are we doing? Now we start to form hypotheses. We're not doing anything yet. We're just thinking, and we're going, I might need gas. Maybe my battery is out. Maybe my starter's not working. Maybe I have a corroded cable, whatever. These educated guesses are called hypotheses. Okay? Once you have carry out your hypotheses, you put them in an order of what's most probable, number one, least probable, number two, and so on. Okay? So you might check the battery because that's probable and easy to check. That would be your first hypothesis. Okay? So notice that in the scientific method, we test one item at a time. We don't try to fix a whole bunch of things at the same time, because in the scientific method is not enough to get a certain outcome. We're trying to find the answer as to why that outcome took place. Okay? So if you get out and you charge the battery and you put fuel in the car and you change a cable, you just violated the scientific method. You have to test one variable at a time. You might charge the battery, turn it on. It doesn't work. Hypothesis one did not work. Now you put gas in the tank, turn it, didn't work. Hypothesis two did not work. Okay. Every time that you're going through this, you're going through the scientific method, testing one variable at a time until your car turns on. Once the car turns on, now you come with a conclusion. What's the conclusion? The cable going to the starter was corroded. And now you can publish that. You can tell your audience, your wife, your husband, whoever, this is what was wrong. Okay. So it's important to know that with this scientific method, we test one variable at a time. Okay. So the variable is a trait under observation. In addition to this, sometimes we have to have a control. Okay. So let's say your scientific method deals with which is the best fertilizer. Okay. What would you do? Well, you might use the very best fertilizer that you've ever had on one plant. You might use only water and no fertilizer on another plant, and then try different fertilizers on all the other plants. The one with the best fertilizer that you know, that's called your positive control. That's the best outcome that you know of. The one that has no fertilizer, that's your negative control. That's what's supposed to happen to the plant without fertilizer. Now that positive and negative control gives you a basis of comparison to see how good the other fertilizers are. Okay. So anytime that you're carrying out an experiment, you have to have a control. Sometimes you only need a positive control. Sometimes you only need a negative control. But a lot of times you have the option, you want to have both, positive and negative controls. What do we say about a hypothesis? It's an educated guess that has not been proven to be true. Okay. And now we're going to go into the historical application of the scientific method in biology. Okay. So the first individual attributed with using the scientific method in biology is Louis Pasteur. Okay. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with France. Okay. You should know that history is typically based on war and money. It's always war or money. This one is money. Okay. They have all these vineyards, and these were fantastic times. Okay. Contemplate for a minute the wine of that time. What do? They cut a whole bunch of what do you call it? Grapes. They throw them into a big vat, and then a whole bunch of women who may or may not wash their feet get into the vat. They stomp all over the grapes. Delicious. And as they do this, they're creating grape juice as they stomp on the grapes. And then what they do, and you got to love this part, is they put the grape juice in a big wooden casket open to the environment. And then something, we don't know what, lands into the vat. And if you're lucky, it turns into wine. If you're not lucky, it turns into vinegar. And these guys were losing a lot of money because they were making wine. They were making vinegar, or it was getting spoiled, even worse. Okay? So they went to one of the foremost scientists at the time, which is Louis Pasteur. Okay? And we say that it goes under the auspice of him investigating spontaneous generation. I'm not going to complicate the topic, because him distributing spontaneous generation, the belief that life comes from non-life, was a side effect of what he was really trying to do, which is save these vineyards pocketbook. Okay, so what happened? He gets some grape juice, okay, and he puts it into a swan-necked container like this. All right. And as hopefully you know, the air that we breathe is full of bacteria, is full of all types of things. So this bacteria would fall onto the neck and stay at the bottom of the neck, trapped, leaving the grape juice sterile. Okay. And this was important because people did not know what it was that changed the grape juice. Okay. Then what he did in one is he would cut the swan neck, and stuff would grow in there. On the other one, he would mix what was at the bottom of the swan neck, and no surprise, stuff grew in there. Okay. So now we know that whatever makes this stuff turbid, makes it grow opaque, is something in the air. Okay. The question now is, how are we going to make this into grape? How are we going to make this grape juice into wine? And what he did, as should be obvious to us now, is he pitched one with yeast. Yeast carried out alcoholic fermentation, making wine. He pitched another one with bacteria. The bacteria carried out lactic fermentation, making the grape spoil and become acidic. So obviously, the answer is you have to pitch the grape juice with yeast. Now, that may be obvious to you and I right now, but back then, this was revolutionary. So now, what do? They would take the grape juice, they would pasteurize it, which means that they would heat it in order to kill the germs in it. That's great, because maybe we don't want the germs of the feet of 15 girls that were stomping all over this. So we're going to pasteurize the grape juice. We're going to pitch it with yeast, and ta-da, we have wine. Okay. So why are we going through this? Because this was the first use of the scientific method in biology. We have a positive control. We have a negative control. The negative control remains sterile. The positive control turned into something. There was a basis for comparison. There was multiple hypotheses being made. You know, what's going to happen with yeast? What's going to happen with bacteria? What's going to happen if you don't add anything? Okay, that's an important question. So the first use of the scientific method in biology solved this wine issue. Beautiful stuff. Okay, so one of the things that we need to say about the hypothesis is that we have to have an ability to make it falsifiable. In other words, we have to have the physical ability to test it and say that it is not true. If we cannot test it and find a means of showing that it's true or false, falsifiable, then it is not a good hypothesis. So making a hypothesis falsifiable is another way of saying that we have to choose a hypothesis that is testable, okay? That is testable. Okay, let's keep on going here. Biology. What is biology? Well, biology is the study of life. So if we're going to study life, we should define what life is, okay? What is life? Well, life, as it turns out, has about 8 different traits to it. Number one, it should be able to assimilate energy. You and I must eat and breathe in order to assimilate the energy into fats and sugars and proteins that we consume. And then we use energy to maintain our bodies. So number one is assimilate energy, okay? Number two, respond to the environment, okay? The leaves might close their stomata at night in order to prevent carbon dioxide from going to the environment. You and I might put on a sweater if it gets cold, or a coat if it gets cold. We might put on a rain jacket if it's raining. We might wear a hat if it's sunny, or put sunglasses. We are responding to our environment. There's a reason why we're responding to our environment, and that's because we have to do things in order to assimilate energy, and we have to do things to maintain our bodies constant, which is another trait of life that we're going to hit in just a second here. Okay. Oh, and here it is. So we have to maintain our internal environment relatively constant. There's a word for this. It's called homeostasis. Okay. An example of maintaining homeostasis containing a constant body temperature, 98.6 Fahrenheit or 37 degrees Celsius. Our bodies have to be at that temperature. More than 1 degree in either direction, not a good thing. Okay. We need to have a constant blood sugar. If our blood sugar goes too high or too low, we don't feel well. We have to maintain a certain number, a certain amount of hormones in our body. Okay. Testosterone for men, estrogen and progesterone for women. Okay. Growth hormone. All these have to be a certain amount of iron, a certain amount of oxygen in the blood, a certain amount of carbon dioxide in the blood, if you can believe that. All these have to be maintained within narrow limits, okay? I don't know if you guys are nerds like I am. I am. So I love to watch Star Trek, okay? If you watch Star Trek, then you know about this guy by the name of Data. Data is an android, okay? Inevitably, Data gets beaten up every once in a while. And when they wake him up again, they ask him, how do you feel? And he says, I am functioning within normal parameters. Now, to you and me, you might go, what? What did you just say? But really what he's saying is, I am under homeostasis. I am functioning within normal parameters. I am functioning where I'm supposed to be at. So that's his way of saying, I am fine, because everything that's supposed to be working in me is where it's supposed to be. My body is under homeostasis. So awesome, very neat stuff, okay? We have to have the ability to reproduce. Life begets life, okay? So Louis Pasteur disproved spontaneous generation. There was a time when we believed that inanimate objects turned into animate objects. It was crazy. Now we know that life begets life, okay? Um, DNA is a blueprint of life, okay? And when the cell cycle is broken down, okay, when cell division doesn't go through its uh, uh, check cycles in order to divide, okay, when this reproduction event doesn't go under its tests, then you have unabated cell division, unstopped cell division, and this is one of the hallmarks of cancer, okay? So that's important. We possess heredity, okay? Our heredity is encoded in our DNA, our deoxyribonucleic acid. So we all have DNA. There's exceptions to this in small, although viruses really are not considered to be alive, okay? But if you choose to include viruses, some viruses have their information in RNA instead of DNA. It doesn't matter. The point is that information is maintained in some form that can be inherited, okay? So DNA or RNA. It's composed of one or more cells. This is important, okay? So in the hierarchy of matter, the cell is a unit of life. Are there things smaller than the cell? Absolutely. But for us, the definition of life does not take place until we hit the cell, whether that be a bacterial cell, whether that be a plant cell, an animal cell, a single-celled protista, it doesn't matter. Does a unit of life, okay? We are evolved from other living things, hence the theory of evolution. So evolution is very important because it tells us not only that we evolved from other forefathers, but it also tells us that we are related in some way. It tells us how we're related, and it also conveys our diversity, okay? So diversity has to do with the fact that evolution has taken place and we have evolved into many, many different species, okay? So we have evolved from other living things. And finally, we're highly organized, okay? When we die, we cease to be organized. So the thing I find interesting is that you can do this exercise with anything. You can take a robot and go, is a robot alive? Well, apply these 8 criteria to it, okay? And if the answer is yes, then it's alive, okay? Because we're coming closer and closer to that day when maybe we have artificial intelligence and we have machines that are able to reproduce themselves. So we're getting closer and closer to where machines are going to check each one of these 8 boxes. But to my knowledge, we're not there yet. Life is hierarchical, okay? What does that mean? There's a hierarchy in life, okay? And you should pay special attention to this diagram right here, okay? So we start at the atom, okay? Multiple atoms come together to make a molecule. Multiple molecules come together to make an organelle. An organelle is like an organ, but it's part of a cell, okay? So it's a very small functioning unit, an organelle. Here they're showing you a nucleus as the organelle. Multiple organelles like a nucleus, a mitochondria, a Golgi apparatus, we're going to hit this very soon, come together to make a cell. Here's a unit of life. Here they're showing you a neuron as a cell. Multiple cells come together to make a tissue, okay, in this case, a nervous tissue. Multiple types of tissue come together to form an organ, okay. Multiple organs come together to make an organ system, right? Multiple organ systems like the nervous, the circulatory, the respiratory, the integumentary uh, uh, organ systems come together to make an organism like us. Okay, here's a cute little sea lion. Multiple sea lions come together to make a population. Notice that they're all the same species. Okay, a population. Various different populations, in other words, multiple species, come together to make a community. That community comes together with water, air, soil, and various other communities in order to make what's called an ecosystem. And then the sum of all the ecosystems in the earth make the biosphere. So this is the simplest. Here's the most complicated. So over here, for example, this would be a rainforest. This would be you or me. This could be a heart. This could be a muscle fiber. This could be a mitochondria. This could be a fat molecule. This could be oxygen, nitrogen, potassium, chlorine. Okay, this is a hierarchy of life. Okay, we're almost done. So we're talking about evolution, the gradual modification of populations of living things over life. We're going to hit this into a little more detail in a little bit. Okay, but it's adaptation of life to its environment that brings about evolution. And this is what gives rise to new species. Okay. Let's see. Evolution is important because it tells us two things. Number one, how life became so diverse. So you can have a common ancestor, but as different organisms um, adapt to different environments, you end up with very high diversity. But at the same time, we're related. This is mind-blowing because it means that if you have a blue whale and you go far back enough, there's an ancestor that makes that blue whale related to us. Uh, if you go far enough, you'll find an ancestor that makes a seagull related to us. If you go far enough, you'll find an ancestor that'll make E. coli and us related. So we are all related. All life on this biosphere is related through evolution. But because of the incredible adaptation of life to its environment, we're also incredibly diverse. Okay, very, very important. Look at this. Isn't this beautiful diversity? There's a peacock with this beautiful plumage. I think this is a little. It's not a. It's just a regular frog. I used to think it was a dart frog, but it's not. And believe it or not, that is it. So I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Welcome to biology. Makes me very, very happy to have you. And if you have any questions, I will have office hours tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Thank you very much.